Race and IQ politics. It's bullshit, and even if it weren't, it still wouldn't explain who's rich. So this is something that a lot of people have been getting distorted, particularly in online discourse. So there is this nonsense of race and IQ. First and foremost, how do we define race? That's an important one, and it's actually a very difficult one when you think about it. If we're to go by phenotype alone, that's not helpful. And so it's a category that is very difficult to define scientifically. So that's number one. Number two, the vast majority of estimates, and the one that I tend to go with, is that human beings, in terms of this current form, are more or less 50,000 years of age. So that's number one. Number two, that human beings descend from a relatively small population. It's believed to be around 20,000 individuals. And that on top of that, the Homo sapien is essentially been apart from one another for too short of a period of time for significant evolutionary differences to have happened. So that's number one. Number two, this is an important part that is often neglected in this sort of discourse that happens particularly in right-wing spheres online. The fact of the matter is that even if it were true, which it's not, because the vast majority of scientists, geneticists, and so on and so forth dismiss it, it wouldn't matter. And it wouldn't matter because markets, by their very nature, reward a variety of traits. Intelligence alone is not rewarded materially by markets. If you think about it, there are many different traits that allow for any actor within a market to not only be sustainable, to sustain themselves, but even to attain wealth, intergenerational wealth even. And IQ is merely one of them. An important trait, which is often neglected, is actually large kinship networks. The fantastic, phenomenal rise of the Jews, particularly the Ashkenazi Jews, but really global Jewry in general, especially in the aftermath of the Second World War and the horrible, horrendous thing that they had gone through. Oh, their spectacular rise in a single generation when it comes to the attaining of wealth and education and so on and so forth was in large part driven by their large kinship networks. For example, the Hasidic Jews, often lambasted by critics and anti-Semites, I would argue, but we can get into that another time, as uneducated and so on and so forth, have done fantastically well. Their population growth has been enormous, and they have managed to build infrastructure within their community that adequately supports their community. And they are also contributing members of the countries that they are part of. In fact, they are often a vital asset to the countries they are part of because of those large kinship networks and shared sort of, I don't want to say ideology, but shared law, shared culture, and so on and so forth. And so that is a prime example there, but there's many other different groups that ought to be mentioned. They are simply one example, one extreme example. It's not just intelligence alone, let alone individuals alone, that are responsible for the building of intergenerational wealth. But even on an individual level, let's look at this. There are other attributes, and this is talked about by Thomas Sowell, the right-wing economist who was often cited by many of these sort of right-wing bros, so to speak, and yet they often haven't read any of his work because it is much more nuanced than people tend to think. An example being, and I'll get into this perhaps in another video, he is not against historical reparations, strictly speaking, historical recompense for wrongs done against a people. That's not his position at all. His position is that with regards to African Americans, it simply wouldn't be possible, logistically speaking, because the slave owners today, who knows who they are, who their descendants are, and so on and so forth, that is his position. There isn't a clear agent to blame here. Whereas with, for example, Native American land claims, that's different. There is a demonstrable wrong, and the party that was wronged still exists. The Lakota tribe, for example, the Apache tribe, and so on and so forth, and the federal government. The two entities at hand still exist. There isn't a single means of representation for African Americans, let alone a single means of representation for plantation owners. And so, therefore, according to Thomas Sowell, compensation with regards to the African American situation is simply not possible. That is his position, much more nuanced than people often make out. Now, I'm not saying that I agree with this position, I actually disagree with it, but I'm conveying the nuances of the man at hand who was often sort of used by edgelord, shitlord types online. So that's number one, is that he affirms that markets, by their very nature, are diverse. They reward a diverse array of traits: hard work, tenacity, creativity. Here's another one: wisdom. Wisdom is not the same as intelligence. Another one: cunning. Think about it, cunning. So there are many different attributes: charisma, looks, personality. So basically, the way markets are sort of, unless they have been distorted, which is usually on purpose, they will reward a large variety of attributes. And so any talk about race and IQ and so on and so forth is simply a means of justifying the current elite. That's all it is. It really has nothing to do with reality at all.